Israel-Lebanon relations have experienced ups and downs since their establishment in the 1940s. Lebanon did take a formal part in the 1948 Arab-Israeli war against Israel. But Lebanon was the first Arab League nation to signal a desire for an armistice treaty with Israel. In 1949, Lebanon did not participate in the Six-Day War in 1967 nor the Yom Kippur War in 1973 in any significant way. And until the early 1970s, Lebanon's border with Israel was the calmest frontier between Israel and any of the other adjacent Arab League states. The most turbulent period in binational relations was 1970s and 1980s. Upon the Lebanese Civil War, during the first stages of the war, Israel allied with major Christian Lebanese militias which led the Lebanese government during the early 1980s. The countries effectively reached normalization of relations with US brokered May 17 agreement in 1983. But it had been annulled by Lebanon after power takeover by Druze and Shiite militias in early 1984. Israel also supported the secessionist Free Lebanon State during 1979 to 1984 and its successor South Lebanon Army. Israeli law enforcement treats Lebanon as an enemy state. Israeli citizens or any other person who holds any passport bearing stamps, visas, or seals issued by Israel are strictly prohibited from entry to Lebanon and may be subject to arrest or detention for further inspection. In 2008, a Pew Research Center survey found that negative views concerning Jews were most common in Lebanon, with 97% of Lebanese having unfavorable opinion of Jews. In a 2011 survey again by the Pew Research Center on the Muslim-majority Middle Eastern countries polled held strongly negative views of Jews. In the questionnaire, only 3% of Lebanese reported having a positive view of Jews. Lebanon played a small part in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, where its army only participated in the Battle of Al-Malikiya on the 5th to the 6th of June 1948. During Operation Hiram, Israel captured 15 villages in southern Lebanon up to the Litani River, while one Israeli general proposed capturing Beirut, which he claimed could be done in 12 hours. Israel's Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion refused permission. The armistice agreement between Lebanon and Israel was relatively straightforward. Unlike the other armistice agreements, there was no clause disclaiming the Blue Line as the international border between Lebanon and the former British Mandate of Palestine continued to be treated as the de jure international border. As a result, Israeli forces withdrew from the villages it had seized during offensive operations in October 1948. Unlike in other Arab states, the Jewish population of Lebanon grew after the 1948 founding of the State of Israel, mostly due to large Christian population in Lebanon. In the early 1950s, direct flights linking Beirut with East Jerusalem were not uncommon. In 1951, Middle East Airlines, Lebanese national flag carrier, expanded its regional network to include East Jerusalem, Jordan. Also, Air Liban, another Lebanese airline carrier, had flights routes linking Beirut with Jerusalem since 1945. However, the 1967 Six-Day War disrupted Middle East Airlines' operations for about 2 weeks and led to the suspension of flights to Jerusalem. Lebanon played a minor role in the Six-Day War, carrying out a single air raid on the first day of the war in which it lost one aircraft. During the Yom Kippur War, Lebanon sent radar units to Syria for air defense, but refrained from participating in the war. Following Black September in Jordan in 1970-71, the PLO relocated from Jordan to southern Lebanon, from where it had carried out attacks against Israel. Israel did not refrain from targeting Lebanese infrastructure when retaliating for Fedayeen attacks, notably in the 1968 raid on Beirut airport. This turned Lebanon, which had largely stayed out of the Arab-Israeli armed conflicts, into a battleground between Israel and Palestinian Fedayeen. Lebanon's civil war began in 1975 when Falangist gunmen ambushed a bus killing the 27 Palestinian passengers on board. The complexities of the war were tied to Lebanon's sectarian political structure dividing Shia and Sunni Muslims and Christians. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon in the middle of the civil war after a gunman from Abu Nadal's organization attempted to assassinate Shlomo Argov. The Israeli Prime Minister blamed the PLO for the incident and used it as an excuse to begin Operation Peace for Galilee and the 1982 Lebanon War. During the invasion, Israel allied with the Falangist Christian militant group against the PLO and Shia militias. UN Children's Fund wrote that from the beginning of the Israeli attack on June 4 to August 15, 1982, 29,506 Lebanese and Palestinians had been killed as a result of the Israeli bombardments. 80% of them civilians. Several thousand people were arrested and kept in Israeli-controlled prisons. The Israeli army cut off electricity and water supply to West Beirut, depriving at least 30